was born on 6th of March, 1935.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I was born in, my mum actually comes from Pretoria.
Okay.
And being the eldest daughter is always born
Yeah.
at her parents' homes. I was born in
You
Pretoria.
were born in Pretoria.
But the
okay.
family were actually living in Doornfontein,
Okay.
you know. And my brother is a year and 3 months younger than me in dress, you know. And my mum found it difficult to cope with 2 children, you know. So my granny decided that I must go and stay in Pretoria so that my mum will at least be able to cope with
Yeah.
Indris alone and not
Right.
just both of us. And I actually stayed in Pretoria and did my primary schooling in there.
Okay.
You know, in Pretoria, it was a big family. It was my granny, and it was all their sons and daughter-in-laws who stayed in this one big house.
Oh, wow.
You know, so and I grew up with cousins, and you know, and we all sort of grew up very close.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
and when I finished primary school, I decided I want to come back to Johannesburg because I think Johannesburg, you know, my parents were living here,
Okay.
and politically it was much more stimulating to be
Yeah.
in Johannesburg because the family knew. I mean, there was a little bit of political activities in Pretoria, but not very much, and the family were a bit conservative,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And in terms of not politically so much conservative as just
So socially.
socially very conservative,
Mm.
you know. And then I came back to Johannesburg and stayed here, and I went to school in Johannesburg Indian High School in Fordsburg.
Okay.
There were some exciting times there, you know, because there was quite a community and there was sort of some real characters in the area and everybody knew each other, you know. People going past you always greeting one another because everybody knew each other. It was quite a friendly community.
Yeah.
It's just that, you know, your uncles and aunts were all sort of quite conservative in terms of you can't do this, you can't do this. Even like wearing lipstick will be taboo.
And then when you moved to Joburg?
And then my parents were much more open and progressive,
Yeah.
you know, and we would we could go to a party or anything. There was no sort of, and there was a lot of independence,
Yeah.
you know, you know, and my brothers were all here growing up, so it was a different atmosphere. And there was much more political activity because my father was a political activist, and my mother became politically active whenever, you know, there was a rally or demonstration thing. We all went, all 5 children.
Right. So your sort of social life, everything was surrounded politics.
Around politics, and that's how. I mean, even discussions at the table.
Yeah.
You know, we would talk politically. And we were also very much an internationalist, like, you know, which I find very much lacking these days. Like, you know, when there was a coup in Ghana, you know, you would have a demonstration outside the American embassy.
Yeah.
People were much more international in that way,
Yes.
you know. You know, I mean, the xenophobia these days is also the same sort of things, you know. You're tied up to exactly. There isn't that international thing. Education
Yeah.
is lacking.
Yeah.
You know, we get solidarity from throughout the world to apartheid days, but we're not giving that kind of solidarity to people and accepting that kind of freedom from people, you know.
Okay. And so this, you went to Fordsburg High School. Indian High School in
It's
Fortsburg?
a Johannesburg Indian High
Johannesburg
School.
Indian High School in Fortsburg.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was the...
It was quite a very nice school, and we had a lot. Most of the teachers were Afrikaners.
Okay.
You know, I mean, some of them were quite nice. Some of them showed their racism and things like that. And sometimes there's a debate, especially when there's a history lesson
Okay.
or something like that. You know, the students were much more confrontational, which you never found. I never found that kind of thing in Pretoria when I went to school there. You know, which was much more exciting in this way. And then my father died in '53.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, my brother had to leave school, Indris,
Okay.
and he was working, and I left as well to also assist, maintain the family.
How old were you when you left?
Sorry,
How old were you when you left school?
I think it must have been 18,
18.
18 or
Okay.
19, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I didn't finish matric.
Okay.
You know, I left, and Indris and I sort of maintained the family.
Right.
Helped my mother.
Yeah.
And she herself was good, you know, she took in some sewing of garments from people. She even like cooked food for some factory workers who came lunchtime and had food, meal. So my mother always supplemented the income
Yeah.
to maintain the family.
Okay.
And we were politically active at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
So did you get a job when you left school?
I worked in a firm that, you know, were making costumes for theatres. You know, but it didn't last very long. It wasn't a good paid job as well. They did mostly sewing and things like that. And then I worked for the Congress of Democrats, which is the right wing of the Congress movement those days, you know. And I worked there until the state of emergency. But while working there, I was active in the demonstrations and was a general activist, you know, and things like that. And during the state of emergency, the Congress of Democrats was closed down, you know. But South Africa, SACTU, which is the trade union movement, you know, they still functioned. And a lot of the leaders had gone underground at that stage or in detention. And I worked there during the state of emergency.
Okay. What was that like? What was their philosophy, their way of doing things?
Well, you know, you just had to maintain things.
Okay.
You know,
And keep
because
things together.
yeah, and I mean the trade union work has to go on.
Right.
You know, and this is the federation.
Yeah.
It was not the actual
The union.
union. You know, and there were some leaders who sort of popped up now and again. You know, one of the people that sort of assisted was Bob Heppel. You know, and he sort of came and when we had meetings and things like that, because there was none of the top leaders were around. They were either in detention or they were in exile.
Right.
You know, the detention or they went into hiding. And that's it. Some people went to like Swaziland and things like that and came back.
Yeah.
You know. And then after the state of emergency, I went back to the Congress of Democrats.
Okay. So they reopened.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and I worked there, and then the Congress of Democrats was banned.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean,
So I had to find a job, and I went back to sector. You know,
right. Yeah.
and I worked there. You know, and by that time, Phyllis Altman was one of the people in charge there. You know, and I only lasted 11 months because then I was placed under banning orders.
Okay.
You know, with all the restrictions of confined to Johannesburg, cannot be in more company of more than one other person. And also the irony was my brother Murthy was a listed person.
Okay.
And officially we couldn't communicate.
Yeah.
And we were living in the same house.
And was it a surprise when you got the banning order, or was it something you were expecting?
No, I wasn't expecting it.
Okay.
It was a surprise,
Yeah.
And it was like almost a Christmas present. It was just before Christmas when they came, know. And, then I couldn't work at SATU anymore.
And this is just, the reasoning behind this is just that your connection with SACTU meant that you...
No, I was an activist, and
Yeah.
I mean, not just,
Right.
but it restricted you after that. You cannot
Yes, no.
enter the building where there's a trade union or anything, you cannot work for such
Yeah.
organizations.
Yes, yes.
And after a little while, there was a very progressive bookstore run by Fanny Klinneman and Joe Mowat, and Fanny offered me a job.
These are Congress of Democrats people.
They weren't quite, they were sympathetic, and
Okay.
I think they were sort of ex-party people, and
Okay.
they were very sympathetic. And I mean, people like Helen Joseph worked there,
Okay.
Molly Anderson worked there, and even what's her name, Eve Hall worked there. So they, she wasn't afraid to take on people who were politically active and banned. They worked in the bookshop, and it was a beautiful bookshop. When you could get, they used to sell handbook from under the counter to some people.
What was it called?
Vanguard Booksellers.
Vanguard Books. Okay.
Yeah,
It's a good name.
Yeah, Vanguard Booksellers.
Yeah. Where was it?
It was in Jabez Street.
In Jabez Street. Okay.
Yeah, between Commissioner and Market Street.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it was quite, the entrance was quite small, and there were children's books on top. And you went downstairs, and it was sort of fairly big. I think it was owned by an insurance company, and they wanted to demolish the place eventually.
Oh, really?
That's how they lost everything because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I worked there until I was detained myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were the circumstances leading up to that?
My political activities, but it also had something to do with the whole family activities.
Yeah.
But before me, people like Winnie Zella Mandela and Joyce Sekekane and all these people were already detained a month before
Right.
I was detained.
Okay.
And then they came for me. Now, these people were regulars to our house,
Oh, okay.
And so they they detained me, and for the first week I spent in the fort.
Yes. Yeah. At the
From
women's jail.
detention.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't know what's happening. You just left there, and then after that I was taken to Compole Building,
Yeah.
where the interrogation takes place.
Yeah.
From there, they took me to Compole Building, and the interrogation, I was there from Monday to Saturday afternoon,
Okay. Yeah.
and the interrogation sort of lasted more or less the
whole time.
and no sleep, standing some of the time. And in fact, on Friday night, I sort of started hallucinating.
Terrible.
And they seemed to give me some sort of solution or something to drink, and they camped bed, and I slept for a few hours on that, and the next morning they were interrogating me again. This is Saturday. And they were, of course, wanting to go off for the weekend, so they took me to Pretoria Central Women's Prison.
Okay.
And that's where I was, And they brought me back on Monday to interrogate. My hallucination is about flying on a plane, and there was another plane, and I was taking money from one plane to another. It was a weird sort of
like a dream.
relation.
Yeah.
It was like a dream. And obviously I must be speaking.
Oh,
You know?
okay.
So they said, oh, yes, I've got on something. She knows about money coming into the country. They caught on to that, you know. And that's why they interrogated me that Saturday morning and that Monday.
So they thought there was something more that was useful that you could, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, they left me there after that, and it ended there, you know. So, and then they came back and they said, you know, we would like you to give evidence. I said, I don't think so. I said, well, think about it, and they left me.
Okay. Yeah.
Until they took me to, this was 6 months later.
Oh.
I was in
So
solitary.
they left you for 5 months almost without...
Yeah, well, I was picked up in July.
Okay. You were picked up in July and they interrogated you for a couple of weeks?
1 week,
One
week, you know.
And Monday.
Yeah.
And then they took you to Pretoria?
They left me in
And
Pretoria.
they left you in Pretoria for 6 months?
Yeah, you know. And they didn't even tell me where they're taking me. But I knew, when I got to the synagogue, I realized that this is because the treason trial took place there.
Oh, right.
So I knew what it is. But outside, as I got off, my mum and my cousin were standing there. And my cousin said, oh, look, here's your Shanti. And she started running towards when the police threatened her, you know. And they called me in when it was my turn to go in. And, you know, then I said, I don't think I want to give evidence, and I want to see a lawyer. And that was the first time I was like seeing somebody outside.
Oh, wow.
You know.
Yeah.
Jack Gunter also came to see me.
Okay.
He said, look, he's not going to influence me one way or the other. You see, the judge was, I think it was quite a sort of he had some sort of humanity about him. He says, please persuade her to give evidence because I don't like sentencing her.
Yeah.
You know? So, but he was also the same judge who sentenced in 1963, Indris.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And Raji and Sharish.
Yeah.
He was the judge in that trial.
Okay.
And he was the judge in this trial. And this is the trial known as the 22, where Winnie and Joyce and a whole lot of people. And there were people from all over South Africa, and I think there were quite a number of them from the Cape.
And did you know most of them, or did you know only Winnie and
No,
Joyce?
I just knew some. I knew the Nzangas, you know, from Soweto. I didn't know a lot of those people.
Okay.
You know, so I said.
And you met those people through your activities, just.
Well, Winnie was actually became a friend of the family.
Okay.
In fact, Winnie's 2 daughters stayed with us, and they went to a coloured school in Doornfontein.
Oh, okay.
You know, until the police found out, and you know, they made sure that the children were expelled from there.
Okay.
I mean, when I was detained, we had 2 of these concise in Reader's Digest books. You know, they said I can take it, but when I got to the fort, they took it away. You know.
Right.
So my complaint to the magistrate, I've got nothing to read. After my interrogation, after a while, they gave it back to me.
Okay.
They gave me, and you know. So, and I read the same thing over and over again, you know. And the conditions inside was you just had a bucket and then a bottle of water.
Okay.
And felt mat, some funny blankets.
Yeah.
That's all. And winter was terribly cold.
Oh.
I was detained in winter,
Yes.
you know. Yeah. And you're just there in a small cell, all by yourself. And, you know, this is sort of a big hall, looks like. And the walls, you know, it was like lots of partitions, but it didn't go right up to the ceiling. But there was netting on top. And you can see the rats running there. It's, you know, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And it was like echoing because it was empty. You know, there weren't many people there. You know, especially like, I think when I was taken to this section, that's when people like Winnie and them were charged already in the trial of the 22.
Yeah.
And that was seemed to be going.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything, you know.
Yeah.
In the middle of the trial, I was brought in to give evidence.
Yeah.
You know. And suddenly when they released me, you know, and I was still under banning orders.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, before I was detained, I was rebanned in '68. It was 5 years.
Before you were detained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I was rebanned. And then I thought, Ramni, my sister, was already in England.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe I should join her.
Yeah.
And
This is before you were detained. You had this
yeah, so I went to the British consulate, and they were taking their time. They never sort of responded or anything.
Yeah.
You know. And when I was detained, the family was, there was somebody called John Slapobersky. They seemed to have released him so that he can go to Israel.
Okay.
So the family were trying to do the same thing for me,
Right.
you know. And by that time, I think things were difficult for South Africa because the anti-Apartheid movement was becoming stronger.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was a rugby match that was sort of literally ruined by anti-Apartheid movements and things like that. And they found that, you know, they are safer keeping you in the country under banning orders
Right.
than to let you go and
Tell your story.
preach it.
Yeah.
You know, with the apartheid system to other countries, because anti-apartheid was really gaining momentum throughout the world by this time. You know?
Yeah.
So, and they refused to let me go,
Okay.
you know. And then we threatened to take them to, after detention, it was...
After detention. How did you get out of detention?
Oh, they just let me out.
They just decided it wasn't worth it anymore.
Yeah, but then I realized also what happened was these people who were charged, the 22, they discharged them, you know, at that stage when they reconvened after Christmas, and they thought they would bring sort of more serious charge, you know. So they re-detained them and then charged them under Communism Act, you know.